First things first. I need to put my glasses on. So, I am going to start with a place that some of you may have heard of before. It is called Althorp or Althorp, and it is in Northamptonshire. You may have heard of the place before because it is the ancestral home of Princess Diana and the Spencer family. So let's take a look. Althorp, the magnificent Northamptonshire seat of Earl Spencer, has been the residence of his proprietors from the olden time, as Baker says. In his history of the county, the simplicity of its exterior is fully compensated by the attractions within. Its magnificent library is one of the wonders of England, and its superb collection of paintings another. Since Althorp has been in possession of the Spencers, it has been honoured by 2 royal visits. The first was paid by the Queen and the elder son of James I, and the second by William III in 1695. When a large gathering of the nobility and gentry of the county took place in honour of the event. That a residence of the antiquity and importance of Althorp should have a ghost is nothing unusual. If indeed it had several, it need not be a matter of wonder, as such things go. The apparition which is connected with Earl Spencer's palatial dwelling, however, is not of the character one generally finds connected with places of that rank, nor are we aware that it habitually haunts the place. But it is so remarkable an instance of ghost seeing, related to us on such good authority, that is well worth recording here. Mr. Drury, afterwards Archdeacon, was invited by Lord and Lady Littleton to accompany them on a visit to Earl Spencer, the lady's father, then at Althorp. After dinner, Mr. Drury and Lord Littleton amused themselves with billiards, and continued so late at their game that at last one of the servants went to them to request that when they went to bed they would extinguish the lights themselves. He asked them to be very careful in doing so, as Lord Spencer was always uneasy about fire. Looking at their watches, they were amazed to find that it was past 2, and both of them went to bed without further delay. Mr. Drury was awakened from his slumbers by the reflection of a light falling on his face. Opening his eyes, he beheld at the foot of his bed a man dressed as a stableman, in striped shirt and flat cap, and carrying a lantern with the bull's eye turned full upon the disturbed sleeper. "What do you want, my man? Is the house on fire?" exclaimed Mr. Drury, but he received no reply, his visitor remaining silent and immovable. "What do you mean by coming into a gentleman's room in the middle of the night? What business have you here?" he demanded, but, unable to elicit any response, became more imperious in his remarks, bidding the fellow be gone as an impudent scoundrel, whose conduct should be reported to his master. The figure then slowly lowered the lantern and passed into the dressing room, from which there was no other means of exit than that by which he had entered. "You won't be able to get out that way," Mr. Drury called out, and then, overcome by drowsiness, he dropped off to sleep again, without even waiting to see the result. Next morning, Mr. Drury remarked to Lady Littleton that it was a very odd thing House at Althorp ever beheld the apparition of the dead groom again is another matter about which we are unable to furnish any information. Okay, so let us find another story. Okay, let's try Bagley House. In an interesting paper on Devonshire ghosts, contributed by Miss Billington to Merry England for August 1883, is an account of Bagley House near Bridport, a well-known haunted building. About this old residence various ghostly legends have clustered, but Miss Billington refers mainly to a traditional squire, Light. This worthy was formerly owner of Bagley. He had been hunting one day, says our authority, and after reaching home had gone away again and drowned himself. His groom had followed him with a presentiment that something was wrong, and arrived at the pond in time to see the end of the tragedy. As he returned, he was accosted by the spirit of his drowned master, which unhorsed him. He soon fell violently ill and never recovered, one of the consequences of this illness being that his skin peeled entirely off. Shortly after Squire Light's suicide, his whole house was troubled with noisy disturbances which were at once associated with the evil deed of self-destruction. It was suggested that the spirit should be formally and duly laid or exorcised. A number of the clergy went, therefore, for that purpose and succeeded in inducing the ghost to confine itself to a chimney in the house for a certain number of years. It is not known exactly now for how long. For many years after this, however, the place remained at peace, but on the expiration of the power of the charm, very much worse disturbances broke out again. Raps would be heard at the front door, steps in the passage and on the stairs, doors opening and closing. The rustle of ladies dressed in silk was audible in the drawing room, and from that room the sound was traced into a summer house in the garden. The crockery would all be violently moved, and at certain rare intervals a male figure, dressed in old-fashioned costume, is said to have made itself visible and walked about the house. The neighbours say that these extraordinary occurrences continued for many years. They believe in them most firmly and are of opinion that as long as the house stands, it will be thus troubled. Okay, so the next house story we're going to do is was a flight of dark oaken steps forming part of a staircase leading apparently to some chamber above, and on these stairs the fading gleams of summer's twilight shone through. While Dr. Farquhar wondered, and if the truth be told, chafed at the delay which had been interposed between him and his patient, the door opened and a female, somewhat richly dressed, entered the apartment. He, supposing her to be one of the family, advanced to meet her. Unheeding him, she crossed the room with a hurried step, wringing her hands and exhibiting by her motions the deepest distress. When she reached the foot of the stairs, she paused for an instant, and then began to ascend them with the same hasty step and agitated demeanour. As she reached the highest stair, the light fell strongly on her features and displayed a countenance, youthful indeed and beautiful, but in which vice and despair strove for mastery. If ever human face, to use the doctor's own words, exhibited agony and remorse, if ever eye, that index of the soul, betrayed anguish uncheered by hope and suffering without interval, if ever features betrayed that within the wearer's bosom there dwelt a hell, those features and that being were then present to me. Before he could make up his mind on the nature of this strange occurrence, he was summoned to the bedside of his patient. He found the lady so ill as to require his undivided attention, and had no opportunity, and in fact no wish, to ask any questions which bore on a different subject to her illness. But on the following morning, when he repeated his visit, and found the sufferer materially better, he communicated what he had witnessed to the husband, and expressed a wish for some explanation. The steward's countenance fell during the physician's narrative, and at its close he mournfully ejaculated, "My poor wife, my poor wife." "Why, how does this relation affect her?" "Much, much," replied the steward, vehemently. "That it should have come to this, I cannot lose her. You know not," he continued in a milder tone, "the strange, sad history, and his lordship is extremely averse to any allusion being ever made to the circumstance or any importance attached to it, but I must and will out with it. The figure which you saw is supposed to represent the daughter of a former baron of Berry Pomeroy, who bore a child to her own father. In that chamber above us, the fruit of their incestuous intercourse was strangled by its guilty mother, and whenever death is about to visit the inmates of the castle, she is seen wending her way to the scene of her crimes with the frenzied gestures you describe. The day my son was drowned, she was observed, and now my wife. I assure you, she is better. The most alarming symptoms have gone away, and all immediate danger is at an end. I have lived in and near the castle 30 years, was the steward's despondent personal friend of the Prince Regent, was created a baronet and ranked among the highest authorities in the medical world. When he was at the zenith of his professional career, a lady called on him to consult him about her sister, whom she described as sinking, overcome and heartbroken by a supernatural appearance. I am aware of the apparent absurdity of the details which I am about to give, she began, but the case will be unintelligible to you, Sir Walter, without them. While residing at Torquay last summer, we drove over one morning to visit the splendid remains of Berry Pomeroy Castle. The steward was very ill at the time. He died, in fact, while we were going over the ruins, and there was some difficulty in getting the keys. While my brother and I went in search of them, my sister was left alone for a few moments in a large room on the ground floor, and while there, most absurd fantasy, she has persuaded herself she saw a female enter and pass her in a state of indescribable distress. This spectre, I suppose I must call her, horribly alarmed her. Its features and gestures have made an impression, she says, which no time can efface. I am well aware of what she will say, that nothing can possibly be more preposterous. We have tried to rally her out of it, but the more heartily we laugh at her folly, the more agitated and excited does she become. In fact, I fear we have aggravated her disorder by the scorn with which we have treated it. For my own part, I am satisfied her impressions are erroneous and arise entirely from a depraved state of the bodily organs. We wish for your opinion and are most anxious you should visit her without delay. Madam, I will make a point of seeing your sister immediately, but it is no delusion. This I think it proper to state most positively and previous to any interview. I myself saw the same figure under somewhat similar circumstances and about the same hour of the day, and I should decidedly oppose any raillery or incredulity being expressed on the subject in your sister's presence. Sir Walter saw the young lady next day, and after being for a short time under his care, she recovered. Our authority for the above account of how Berry Pomeroy Castle is haunted derived it from Sir Walter Farquhar. He was a man even more noted for his probity and veracity than for his professional attainments, high as they were rated. The story has been told as nearly as possible in Sir Walter's own words. Now, you may have noticed that this little newspaper clipping was attached inside the book, has no history. Its attraction is its ghostliness. It shows how weird a building can become that has been left to die in deserted woods. I think most people would rather sleep in the Chamber of Horrors than among the ruins of this castle. Everyone who visits it speaks of ghosts. It is good to leave the castle and its death-like woods and find yourself back in the warm humanity of the town of Totnes, with its unbroken record of life and effort, and its